Whether you live in the seclusion of the countryside or in a large city, when an IBMer falls, getting up is difficult or impossible, regardless of where you live.
Welcome to another Myositis episode. We IBMers are always looking for that golden touch that will address some difficulties in our IBM. It's regrettable, but we can't end our IBM at this time, but we can research and discover ways to solve some of our most aggravating problems. It might seem odd that a person deep in stage 3 would be asked to evaluate such a lift. Because of my tenacity of keeping IBMers informed of how I live my IBM life in my home, Indy Lift has asked me to evaluate their redesigned human lift device, specifically targeting people with inclusion body myositis and other skeletal muscle conditions where getting up off the floor is not possible anymore.
As the cost of a human lifting device may be a major investment for some IBMers, let's discuss how many years a person with IBM might benefit from owning such a device from the time you realize you can't get up from the floor anymore, usually in early stage 2. The length of time for your investment in this lift may make all the difference in the world for you. You might be surprised how many years this important lifting device could help you in your home and what the overall investment might be during its years of use, and then recovering some of your costs and reselling your human lift device when it's past its usefulness. Remember, until there is a cure found for IBM, more and more people will be requiring this type of human lifting device. If you've researched Indy Lift's previous models, you've already learned they only lift a person up to a standard chair height of 21 inches. Many IBMers are only able to lock their knees and legs if their bottom side is raised high enough to get to a standing position for assisting in transfers, but require a greater lift height than the original model offered. This new Indy Lift model will raise us IBMers up to a height of 30 inches, which should be high enough for us to get to a standing position. Stephen Powell, founder of Indy Lift, visited Wichita, Kansas the morning of April 28th to deliver the first beta model of the 30-inch lift product to be delivered for an extended amount of time for test purposes. Carolyn Esther, another IBMer from the Wichita area, will be joining us in a few minutes. Let's start off the demonstration part of this episode by seeing if this new product can lift my dead weight butt off the floor and get me back onto my power chair. Because I'm an IBMer deep in stage 3, I will need some caregiver assistance to get to the seated position. Regardless of what IBM stage the fallen person is in, the first important factor to establish is whether or not a serious injury has occurred during the fall.
Are you okay?
If you or your caregiver feel that a serious injury has occurred, do not attempt to use this lift, but rather contact 911 for medical assistance immediately. If no injury requiring immediate medical assistance has occurred, have the caregiver position the fallen person on their side in an L shape. Let's say in this example on their left side. Position the Indy Lift next to the fallen person's buttock area and swing the left side arm hold bar out of the way. Move the cart as close to being underneath the fallen person's buttocks as possible. The caregiver can now assist getting the patient to the seated position either by installing a gait belt around the fallen person's chest or affixing the Indy Lift securement harness around the patient and lifting him or her up to the seated position on the Indy Lift. Swing the left side arm bar and lock it back into position and help the patient position their hand on it. Check the securement harness around the fallen person, making sure it is secure and connected to the Indy Lift. Advise the Indy Lift passenger before starting to raise the lift by pressing the up button on the remote control. Allow the passenger to rest for a short time if necessary. As the Indy Lift raises and approaches to the top end of its elevation, the front of the seat platform will start to tilt forward ever so slightly to enable an easier exit from the lift. Now let's turn our attention to Stage 2 IBMers that may be able to get themselves to a standing position without the aid of a caregiver. In this demonstration, Carolyn, whose FRS score is in the upper 20, has fallen but still has the ability to maneuver herself over to where the Indy Lift is located. She has learned that it's most convenient for her to reach the remote control if it is stored on one of the arm bars. As Carolyn moves close to the Indy Lift, she can grab on to two arm hold bars to help her get seated on the lift platform. She can then simply grab the remote control, press the up button, and raise herself to the point where she can get to the standing position. This 30-inch lift height Indy Lift will raise Carolyn up from the floor to a position where she can lock her legs to get to a standing position in about 1 minute time. By letting the Indy Lift do the work, Carolyn is not expending a lot of her energy trying to get back on her feet. This is very significant for an IBMer after a fall. Many of us IBMers know how exhaustive trying to get up from a fall can be. As soon as Carolyn's legs have straightened up underneath her, she can simply lean forward and get back to the standing position. IBMers have been begging for products with state-of-the-art batteries and charging systems for a long time. Indy Lift has delivered on this promise by providing a state-of-the-art lithium-ion battery that will last for about 30 lift cycles with a person sitting on the platform seat. The Indy Lift features smart technology that cannot be overcharged even if you keep it plugged in for an extended length of time. The cord can either be wrapped around the charger as shown, or can be unplugged and replugged at the charger without needing to disconnect the cord from the wall outlet. This small feature becomes important if you plan on plugging the lift into an outlet that is located on the wall behind your couch or end table. IBMers have been begging for products with state-of-the-art batteries and chargers for a long time, and here it is. Since a human floor lift is more than just a pittance IBM expense, let's consider some other uses other than picking up an IBMer off the floor. Many IBMers have spouses and caregivers that may have had hip or knee problems that might cause problems when doing anything near floor level, and they are afraid they will never be able to get up again. Could this be your answer for continuing your gardening ambitions? I bet there are 100 different uses or applications for helping you justify the cost of this human lift device. Heck, it could even be used as a computer desk in front of any chair in the house when not being used for its original intent. So, what's my bottom line on this Indy Lift product? First of all, I appreciate the fact that a company has recognized the seriousness of our IBM needs. I also appreciate the fact that Indy Lift is making this high lift model exclusive to IBMers for their first several batches of production. The question might be, how long will I be able to utilize this lift? In my humble opinion, the answer to that question depends on the IBMer's condition, the IBMer's weight, and the size and strength of your primary caregiver. As you saw in the early part of this video, this lift and the strength of my caregiver made it a successful device for me. If I was much heavier, or my wife smaller and weaker, I may not have been able to get to the sitting position on the Indy Lift. I would recommend this product to any IBMer that cannot get up from a fall and has an FRS score of 10 or higher. Heck, this lift would have even worked for me a couple of years ago when my score was only a 5. And Carolyn, in Stage 2, demonstrated in this episode, in her first time using this Indy Lift with a 30-inch lift height, she got off the floor and back to a standing position without a lot of physical draining gyrations and allowed her to get back up quickly and without assistance. My IBM friends, although we've been constantly disappointed by IBM research drug trials, we can relish the fact that companies like Indy Lift are working to help solve some of the problems associated with this disease. Watch for additional announcements by Indy Lift and the Myositis Association regarding this lift. For anyone wishing to purchase an FTS Indy Lift as soon as possible, my intelligence source reports that the first batch of these 30-inch lift height units will be available for shipping in July of 2021. Indy Lift is already collecting names of anyone who wants to purchase one of these lifts and will ship by the order they receive these requests. No payment or credit card information is needed to get on the list, and you will be contacted when units are available for payment information prior to shipment of your Indy Lift. I will place Indy Lift's contact information in the information section of this episode. Take a stand, my IBM friends.